monsters, madness, and magic.
All right, folks, welcome to the Monsters, Madness, and Magic podcast. I'm your host, Justin, here with a quick word before we dive in. Now, in this episode, I chat with writer and filmmaker Henry McComas about his movie, The Camp Host, Are You Afraid of the Dark?, Night Terrors, The Monster Squad documentary, and more. As always, thank you all for listening out there, and without further ado, here you go. All right, Henry, take us back in time. You're a youngster. Would you consider yourself a book reader, fort builder, troublemaker, or all of the above?
All of the above, but I didn't always have access to lumber to be a fort builder.
A pillow forts count too?
Yeah. What we did do that I remember very clearly is we grew up in a little suburb in Anchorage, and there was a bunch of houses being developed around there. So we would sneak on and grab the wood and the leftover nails and make bicycle jumps to jump off of.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so you said you were a book reader. Did you have a genre or an author that you lean towards?
Oh, yeah. It was always horror. Like, I was a Goosebumps kid for sure. I grew up on Are You Afraid of the Dark, the TV show. Those had probably, I think, 23 books that came out of it. And then I also read all the R.L. Stine Goosebumps. And when I got old enough to pick my own stuff, not just the Scholastic Book Fair, I was grabbing Stephen King everywhere I could.
Yeah, man. Did you ever, I know myself when I not really outgrew Goosebumps, but, you know, as you get a bit older, you look for a bit more bite. Did you ever read any Christopher Pike?
Oh, of course. I mean, Christopher Pike had some naughty things in there.
Yeah,
it was a delight whenever I could get my hands on those.
Yeah, he's sort of unsung these days, but he was one of my favorites growing up. I got a whole collection over there on the shelf next to my Hardy Boys collection.
Oh, that's awesome. I love the Hardy Boys too. While we're talking about it, I was a huge fan of Gary Paulson.
Yeah.
The Hatchet books, those were insane. And probably it's because I grew up in Alaska, and then also we would take vacations to our family in northern Wisconsin. So I was always around trees and lakes and fishing lures and hooks and gaffs and hatchets. So I think my escapism is, what if I didn't have to hang out with my family and I could just live on an island all day? That was the fantasy.
You mentioned Are You Afraid of the Dark? Also, huge influence on me growing up. What are some of your favorite episodes?
What are my favorite Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes? Do you have time? You have a few days?
We got time, man.
Dead Man's Float is insane because that is a TV show for children where they actually kill the kid in the first couple minutes.
Yeah.
So the stakes were real. Fire Ghost is by far my favorite episode of all time. There's just something really mystic and spooky about staring into the flame. And if you stare long enough, you're going to make a soul come back to life. That's an insane concept to me. Midnight Madness, of course, when you're growing up on that nostalgic feeling of falling in love with movies, but what if the other side of the movie screen is where all the true horror lives, is probably something I've been chasing my entire life. There's so many. I think it's a perfect television show.
I agree with you. And The Tale of the Phantom Cab is also one of my favorites, the very first episode. Any Sardo, any Dr. Vink episode, I'm down for.
All time. And then you get Cutter's Treasure in there where the two come together and your little kid mind is just blown. I loved Sardo, but Vink by far is my favorite character in the series, with a
You did to do one of my biggest regrets with the show is not starting 5 years earlier before Aaron Taker passed away, because he was one of my white whales. I didn't even realize he passed until I went to go look him up. So it was a pretty big bummer.
Yeah, that was a massive loss. I know he had an exceptional theater background. He was one of those actors out there in Ontario. So if a movie or a TV show was coming through, he was going to be in it. I remember just catching up on Universal Soldier, and I didn't remember if I saw any of the sequels, and he's in two of them without the Vink beard. And I'm like, this is crazy.
Shit, so
Yeah, I would have loved to sit down with him and just learn about just to be a fly on the wall and learn about his career.
Yeah. So, sticking with your childhood, do you remember the first movie that you saw in theaters?
I don't know if I necessarily remember the first movie I've seen in theaters. What I remember is the first time I was watching a movie in theaters and my parents actually covered my eyes. And what's crazy was it wasn't a rated R film or anything like that. It was Adam's Family. And it was the scene where Pugsley and Wednesday are doing the school play and they're chopping each other's limbs off with the sword and the fake blood gushes out. And it made my dad so unsettled. And my dad was a guy that could scare easy from television. He was afraid of the Twilight Zone, that he covered my eyes and I couldn't see it. And not knowing what was happening was far more terrifying than the things that were happening on the screen.
Yeah, the Lovecraft approach, which that's why, if you don't describe it, the mind does all the work.
Right. And just to show the funniness of the ridiculousness of parents censoring films. Shortly after we went back home, and I don't know, a week or two goes by, and my dad throws in a VHS of the Terminator, and he's like, "You got to see this. You're gonna love it." And somehow that was more tolerable, this robot taking his human eye out and putting it in the sink, than what was happening in Adam's Family, the family movie.
And, especially in the world we're living in today, the Terminator is a much more realistic possibility of actually happening.
Man, when I was a kid, I was afraid that robots were going to turn us into food. I was afraid that robots were going to walk the planet and kill us with machine guns. I never knew the real fear was that robots were coming for our jobs. It's insane.
That's just the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm anti all AI things, but there is some sort of solace I get when I go to a restaurant and I can order on an iPad as opposed to having an entire conversation. And I promise you that's part of the problem.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So, we've touched on this in previous episodes, but since Andre just made an appearance, just retouch a bit for folks out there that are listening on your introduction to the Monster Squad and sort of its importance to you.
Sure. This would be back when I was a goosebump reading Are You Afraid of the Dark Watching Child? And like I said, I grew up in a small suburb in Anchorage, Alaska, right next to some of the highest mountains in America. And there was a VHS tape that was circulating around my neighborhood. It was a bootleg tape with one of those white label stickers that you put on it, and you would write your title down. And it would be like Red Shoe Diaries, HBO, or something Cinemax, or something like that. But this one said The Monster Squad, and every kid that got a copy of the tape would draw a Dracula, or a Wolfman, or a Gillman, or a Frank. And we would all add to it. And as we watched it, our minds would freaking explode. And when I got a hold of that tape, I watched things that I didn't even know were allowed to happen in movies that were made for me. And it inspired me so much that I wanted to go tell these creepy little tales where the kids were the only ones who knew what was happening in their neighborhood or in their town, and that they're the only ones that could stop the dark forces. That I picked up a little VHS camcorder that my parents had to shoot their wedding with back in the day. And me and my friends spent all winter and summer making our own movies with that camcorder. So if it wasn't for that tape, I wouldn't have been the filmmaker that I am today.
There it is, man. The origin story. Just rehash a bit how you come in contact with Andre and how the doc got off the ground. And just you telling the story that you just told, it had to be fucking mind-blowing just in retrospect when you're thinking of young Henry and now you're working on the Monster Squad documentary.
Oh yeah, it is. But with age, your ability to communicate falters a little and your memory messes up. So I'm leaving a studio that I work with that was owned by Lionsgate Films, and it's our lunch break. And I'm going downstairs and I'm seeing my buddies talk to this guy. And I'm like, "Hey, you guys ready for lunch?" And they go, "Do you know who this is?" And I'm like, "No, who?" And they're like, "Sean from the Monster Squad." And my jaw hits the floor. And all I could say is, "Wolfman's got nads." I fucked the line up. I didn't remember it correctly because I was so shook. And Andre is a nice gentleman. He just let it slide and he started talking with me. He goes, "Oh, are you a fan of the movie?" And I told him my story. I was one of those guys that got the DVD re release back in 2007, 2008 when Fred Decker wrote the personalized letter and everything. I was a huge fan of the movie, and I'm like, "What the hell are you doing here?" And he knew somebody that worked as well, and he would stop by the studio and take meetings and everything. So we went and grabbed a drink, and from that, that turned into many drinks over a couple of weeks, and then that turned into the development of this documentary that would end up becoming Wolfman's Got Nards, a documentary, and making that movie from writing to shooting to editing to distributing it was the greatest crash course ever because I had worked on tons of film and video before that, but nothing as potent as something that had to be the Monster Squad with the likes of Shane Black and Fred Decker and Seth Green in it. And a fan base so rabid where we went to over 22 festivals the entire time. And it opened up a lot of doors and jump-started my career and put me back into the narrative world, the script writing and directing world that I wanted to be in for horror movies to make myself.
That's the dream, man. And it's just funny hearing you talk about, meeting Andre and then freaking out. I wasn't ready for that appearance. And so when he popped his head in, I almost said, "Sean!" I had to be like, "Oh, Andre."
Yeah, no, totally. He would have answered. Don't worry.
Before we continue on, just in your childhood, what sort of records or cassettes were playing around the house when you were, cassette tapes were playing around the house when you were growing up? Were you a big music listener?
Oh, that's funny. So my first two cassette tapes of all time were the soundtrack to The Mask, with the song from Jim Carrey, and Please Hammer, Don't Hurt 'Em by MC Hammer. Now, as I enter my 40th year around the sun, I am getting very nostalgic for 90s things, but not just things that I grew up on, but things that I missed. As a kid and to now, I'm a die-hard hip hop head. I love it. I listen to it all the time. But what I'm nostalgic for is things like Alice in Chains and stuff that I didn't bump all the time when I was a kid. So it was things that I was aware of, but I still get a new experience even though I'm going back in time.
So, you said you were a big hip hop head. Did you go to any concerts or anything, or is that something you do now?
It's definitely something I do now, especially living in LA. What's insane is you can go to almost any hip hop show from a rapper who was big in the 90s for like under $30 because they're just coming in and out of town the entire time. So what's coming up this weekend is I'm going to Rhyme Fest and I'm going to see Raekwon, Ghostface Killah, Exhibit. Just the line is crazy. And I feel so lucky to have access to all of that here because growing up in Alaska, which is also the West Coast, but people don't think of it. That's what we were really listening to was West Coast rappers back in the day.
Yeah, and it's such a contrast with other genres from that era because, I grew up a big Iron Maiden fan, and good luck finding Iron Maiden tickets for $30.
Yeah, that'd be like getting the one Dr. Dre ticket, which probably drops at $500, $5,000 to start off with. But Iron Maiden is awesome.
Yeah, dude. Just a question I like to ask everyone, just because you never know, is what scared you as a kid? You can go, fiction wise or non-fiction wise, or both.
That's really funny. When we were doing the festival tour for Wolfman, we went to Salem Horror Fest, and a pretty good rag was interviewing us, and they asked me the same question. And my pretentious ass was like, "I'm afraid of failure." And I roll thinking of it. What I was trying to communicate is like, hey, us elder millennials are starting to experience something for the first time, and that's called anxiety. We always had it, but we didn't know we had it. And now there's a word for it, and now we're hyper aware of it. But if I had to break down what a fear is, like a primal fear. How about I tell you this nightmare I had the other day? Been getting a lot of nightmares recently. I'm going down the I-5 It's dark. It's pitch black. The moon is super white. Rain is hitting so hard you can't see through the windshield. The wipers aren't doing anything. It's just a skewed perspective. And out in front of me, just like that movie Mothman, but it looks Mothman Prophecies, but it looks a little different, is a sketched out human figure. And the sketch is a bright red neon light. And there's nothing I can do. If I turn left, I'm going to run into the car. If I turn right, I'm going to go into Puget Sound. All I can do is just keep going forward. So I enter it just like Sonic with the gold ring. And as I do, a warp comes over me, whoosh, and everything gets a little weird, but I'm fine. And then there's two more ahead of me. And I hit this guy two more times, and it just keeps coming through me. And by the fourth time, it enters my body, and my hands are locked on the wheel, and I can no longer control them. And it turns a hard right off into the Puget Sound. We're going off a cliff in slow motion, and then I see the car flying from third perspective, and it's going down the water like a freaking torpedo. And right before we get there, I wake up. So my biggest fear is probably being in any situation where I have no control of myself. Something like global aphasia, or where a night terror, where you're awake and you're aware of what's going on, but you can't do anything about it.
Yeah, dude, I was easily going to transition to that after you mentioned that, because I've never had night terrors myself, but I've always been fascinated by them and watched all the documentaries, and it scares the shit out of me. Just the idea of it happening. Do you have night terrors?
I do, and I found out what the cause of it was. For the most part, I have sleep apnea, so I go to sleep with the CPAP. And when I didn't have the CPAP, I was getting night terrors all the time, where I felt like I was awake. I was seeing myself there, and I was looking in front of me, and there was a dark witch in front of me that was going to mess me up, and there was nothing I could do about it. So I would scream and scream as loud as I could, ear-piercing screams, and all that would come out on the other side with my wife sleeping right next to me is, "Help me." And that's real life. I'm screaming in my dream, and she's hearing, and she would wake me up. They say you're never supposed to do that, but I told her, fuck that noise.
Please wake me up.
Screaming, wake me up. I am not about to go toe-to-toe with Freddy Krueger right now.
Did you struggle with that as a kid, or did you get sleep terrors as you got older?
I'm sure we all had them when we were kids. We just don't remember them.
Yeah.
What I'm doing a lot better at is remembering my nightmares. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
For film, for creative work, it's probably good.
Right?
It's funny that you mentioned Freddy, because that's another one of my fears. Not the actual Nightmare on Elm Street films. I could watch those and be fine. But going to sleep, I'm like, man, if I have a dream about Freddy, it's like breaking the fourth wall. It's just going to fuck me up. Please don't let me dream about this dude.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let me tell you this one. My wife used to be so scared of Freddy Krueger. She knew what it was and what he was and what Nightmare on Elm Street was, but she had never seen a movie. And her older cousin would babysit her with her friend, and they would go, 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. And she would get so terrified off of that noise and just the scissor hands of it all, the knife hands of it all. And so she had to go to child therapy. And the psychiatrist is talking to Natalie, and she's like, I don't know what you're afraid of. There's nothing scary about Freddy Krueger. He goes, just pretend. If he starts coming towards you, he starts shrinking down into a little piece of candy. And then when he becomes candy, take the candy and swallow it. And I'm being told this. I'm like, this is the worst advice ever.
Do not do that.
And one of the greatest Freddy Krueger kills ever. Like your shrink's a freaking genius. Because what's going to happen is she's going to gobble that candy up, and then Freddy's going to burst out the stomach like an alien. I'm like, oh my god.
That's exactly what was going through my head as you were describing.
Yeah.
Tell that shrink to watch some more movies.
Exactly. Well, then the shrink turned around, and it was this guy in a Christmas sweater with red and green stripes. Real weird. I'm talking. Dr. Krueger.
So, dude, as you're growing up, you just mentioned the Monster Squad sort of inspired you, but when did you first begin to work behind the camera, period? Like, what was that transition?
Definitely making VHS tapes on the camcorder with my friends was my first knowledge of it. And when I say that, guys, I'm not that old. Yes, we were going into an era where we would have IMAX and iMovies and things like that. But first, and very early on, it was a camcorder where I would edit from VCR to VCR. And then when I was turning, I don't know, maybe 12 to 14, the IMAX were coming out and there was iMovie. And I would find a way to take the analog source of the VHS and feed it through FireWire into my computer. And I had a nonlinear editing system. By doing all that, I got to go to New York Film Academy in Los Angeles. I know it's very confusing, but we shot 16 millimeter motion picture shorts when I was 16 years old on the Universal backlots. I remember my short was done on the Jaws set with the big Amityville billboard. And then from there, this whole time, I'm this kid who loves hip hop and movies. I got to get out of Alaska. I got to get to Hollywood as quick as I can. So somebody came in and talked to our art class about this college called Art Institute of Seattle. And it was a trade school. You know, you're just going to get your associate's degree. But all I needed to know is that it would get me out of Alaska and get me closer to California. And that's when I started making that pilgrimage over to LA. In Seattle, I was doing a lot of commercial work, but I was still doing short films. I went to Colorado for a while where I joined the Colorado Film and Video Association and helped with the tax incentives. We did things like bring Tarantino to Colorado to shoot Hateful Eight. And by the time I ended up in LA, I had spent all these time polishing my skills that I started landing film gigs within the first 6 months. And it never stopped from there.
So there's a project on your credits I wasn't familiar with I wanted to ask you about, which is Unwrapping Candyman.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that was on there.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely up my alley. What's the story there?
There is an awesome producer named Heather Buckley who works on films as well as a lot of documentaries that are used as supplement content and Blu-rays. So if you go get the Shout Factory of like the special edition of Candyman, the 4K, almost all of these docs will be there. And I believe the credits I did for those were shooting and editing. I also helped produce, but I wasn't a producer on it. And they're awesome. It was such a great time working with them. I got to work with a lot of the cast and crew, had a blast. But the coolest one is on Arrow Films 4K, which I don't know if there was ever an American release. There might have been now. But if you can get your hands on that, we do a 30-minute documentary with Clive Barker and get one of his most intimate, introspective interviews of all time. And just being there, listening to this conversation and his stories unravel and seeing how that man's brain works was one of the most inspiring experiences of my life. So I highly recommend you go find that.
I will. Clive Barker is one of my favorite authors, period.
Same.
Sort of a one of one. There's really no one like him. So when it comes to the camp host, you know, when do you, correct me if I'm wrong now, but that is your first feature. When did you decide internally, you know, it's time to do the damn thing, you know, let's make a movie?
Yeah, the camp host is my first narrative feature.
Okay.
I've done a bunch of documentaries before that. But how did the camp host happen? That's a hard story to unpack, but we'll get into it. Something happened in America. You may have heard of it. It was called the global pandemic. But something called COVID happened.
I'm familiar.
And when that went down, we got locked up in our houses like cell block 8, and we weren't allowed to leave, and everybody got a bunch of cabin fever. And I feel like during that time, relationships either made it and went to the next level, or they dissolved and couples were breaking up. For whatever reason, I went into a deep, dark depression because I'm a writer, director, producer that needs to stay busy. And my job was non-existent at the time. And I was just surrounded by 4 walls. And this is this dark presence that I feel lost in, much like my nightmare I was talking about, with no control of the situation. So what my wife did is she grabbed me by the collar. We went out and we got a Ford van. We put a futon in the back and we turned it into a camper van, and we hit the long road to recovery. And we would go to campsites all over the country instead of being locked down in the house. And over that journey, I slowly started to discover myself again and find my personality. And then I picked up my computer and I started writing. And what I wrote was a personal story about a couple that are trying to find out who they are together. And they go across this campground. And in that story was a bunch of real life situations that happened. And then I put an exclamation point on it and made it very horror and genre. And you talk about all kinds of things. There's a camp host, and there's all these new people that are coming out to the camp host's campground, and they're disrespecting the campground. And the camp host feels entitled to that land, like she owns that land and she's the protector of the land. Meanwhile, people are just trying to escape and be human beings. And now we're at odds at each other. So the camp host has these rules. And if you don't follow these rules, like make sure you put out your fires, you might get burned in a real way. And that's how the idea for the camp host started. And I spent 2 to 3 weeks writing that script, a couple months revising it afterwards, but the story just flew right out of me. And I was like, I think this is good. Is this good? I shared it with my wife, and she's like, I think it's good. And so then I sent it out to a couple of friends, one of which was an executive producer, a VP over at Mar Vista at the time in Fox. And she thought it was good too. And she shared it with Tubi. And somehow this project that pulled me out of depression and saved my life with some of the darkest things I've ever put on paper is now rescuing me. And I fell into making my first narrative feature film.
And I told you before, considering it's your first narrative feature, it's impressive, man. Like, as horror fans, we can usually figure out what's going to happen midway through the movie, and you can kind of, she's going to die. Well, that's not the case. You completely threw me off with how you wrap everything up. Just curious, while you and your wife were traveling yourself, was there a creepy camp host that you encountered yourself that you were like, oh?
100%. So at this point, like, everybody should go watch the camp host, because we may go into spoilers. The first time we got to a campground in our van, the camp host was like overactively hyper and joyful until she talked about the rules of the campground, and the seriousness took over her that almost felt threatening. And we asked how much it was to stay. And she leans in, looking at my wife's earrings, and she goes, "Free if you give me those earrings." And I had just given them to my wife, and Natalie kind of giggles it off. And she goes, "No, I'm serious. I want those earrings. You can stay here for free. Give them to me." And it was just super weird. We didn't give her the earrings. We paid the rate. We went into the campground. We met a couple of campers, and we went to a bonfire, and we had a great time. One of the things the camp host told us was that quiet hours was after 9 p.m., 10 p.m. And I'm talking to these strangers, and we're becoming friends. And we hear a whack to the RV door where the camp host is staying. And she's looking at us, and it's dark. I can hardly see. And she goes, "Hey, hey." There was just a little interference. Are we still on?
Yeah, we're good, man.
Okay. She goes, hey, do you know what time it is? And my wife and the other strangers, they don't hear anything. They're having a good time. And I look at my watch, and it's like 10:02 p.m. And she gets in this golf cart, and she turns on the high beams of her golf cart. And she goes, "Do I need to come over there?" And she literally revs this tiny little golf cart, trying to put intimidation on us, like she was going to go put our fire out and kick us out for talking and having a good time in an otherwise empty campground. And I was like, this is insane. This lady is a character. And she actually had the the makeup tattoos, the henna or whatever you call it, on her chest as well. She had this super hippy dippy feel about her, but really she was a dictator, and that's where I started getting that idea.
Wow. Now,
Yeah.
in retrospect, this is a lot more autobiographical than I realized.
Well, in one of the campgrounds in Iowa, there was a couple next to us that were in a tent, and they were loving each other so passionately and so loud that it was hard to tell whether or not it was a good thing or if a murder was happening.
Oh no.
But it was screams of pleasure, by the way, because they were having the best time the next morning. But I was like, this camp life, it opens itself up to a lot of horror scenarios.
Let me jot that one down.
Yeah. And I actually got locked in an outhouse, and my wife couldn't hear me because she was listening to Bob Marley so loud.
This movie just wrote itself.
It sure did.
Also, potential spoilers, so please stop the podcast if you're listening. Go watch the movie. But I just thought it was a funny scene. The banter between the two leads, the husband and wife, when he returns from the outhouse and she's giving her rendition of this crazy thing that's happening. He's like, no, whatever, but there's a demon in the bathroom. This is not the ridiculous thing.
Yeah, the banter among those two were probably the most real part of the script, I would have to say.
You said while we were setting this up that Brooke Johnson was a big help and you learned a lot from her. So what did you learn from her?
The moment we signed Brooke to the project, she started calling and emailing me, and I'm so thankful for it because we were having the deepest conversations about character as she was trying to get her head into who the camp host is. And it never stopped. We would, and when we were done with the day, the nights would keep going with our conversations. And watching her become the camp host and how she was with the rest of the cast. When we were having lunch, she would come sit with the crew. She was just so happy to be on set and to work on that film that I really feel like she made it hers as much as it's mine. And I will be forever indebted to her for that. She truly is a vision and an inspiration.
Where did you guys shoot it? Was it on an actual campground somewhere?
It was. We shot it outside of Toronto. So it was a campground in Ontario that I keep seeing every time I watch episodes of Star Trek Discovery. They must have shot at the same locations.
Yeah. Just curious, did the thought ever cross your mind to cast Andre in the movie in some role?
Always, always, always. I think for Frank, I wanted to cast Fred Decker or Shane Black back when we were going to shoot in LA. I thought that would have been really cool.
So, just in general, what would you say is the best filmmaking advice that you've been given, and who gave it to you?
I've gotten so much advice throughout the time, and I think it's all great. I know Fred, his favorite part is editing. He feels like that's when the film comes alive. And I remember he told me, that's the part. The reason why that's the funnest part is because you get to fix everything you weren't able to fix when you were out on set. And I feel like that's so true for any filmmaker, including Scorsese or Spielberg. But the biggest thing that I've learned, I went into Camp Host with a lot of prep because I was prepping it since I wrote it. As a writer director, I knew how I was going to shoot it. When we went to Toronto, we only had a month really until we were going to shoot. So I think for every film from here on out, I'm always going to ask for a long prep time, because just like when you're cutting the film in the end, that's when the movie becomes the movie and you get to fix what you do. I feel like before that, your entire movie is the work you put in the prep. So the beginning part and the end part are the two most important parts to give you your actual product.
Well said. Since that was your first narrative feature, I don't think you're going to be scratching the itch again soon. Is there anything that you can spill without, you know, breaking any NDAs or saying too much?
You mean what's coming up?
Yeah, yeah.
There's so much coming up. Camp host really opened the door for me. How do I phrase these things? I'm going to be the things you can expect from me are a couple of features down the road, a segment in a very cool horror anthology, an adaptation with a New York Times bestseller, and hopefully I'll just keep writing and directing original content.
Awesome. Also, another spoiler, so pause, folks. Give you a second to do that. The movie sort of leaves, you know, it's kind of open ended. It leaves the door open for another installment. Is that of any interest?
Uh, the answer to that question, and I get it a lot, will there be a Camp Host 2? I have an incredible idea for Camp Host 2. It's a road trip movie. We saw what it was like on the campground. What happens if the campground comes to you and follows you wherever you go? But the answer to that question is it depends how many people are going to talk about the Camp Host. It had a very good premiere. People seem to dig it, but they need to keep watching and keep talking about it. So if you watch it, you like it, give it a good review on Letterboxd. I'll give you Fox personal information. You can write and call them. I'm joking about that part. But, you know, it's out there in Tubi. Share it and talk about it. And if you like it enough, just like the fans who made Monster Squad come out on DVD and all of that, that's where I really feel like the power is. The power is forever in the audience. So yes. I'm just grateful that somebody is watching it. Thank you.
Thank you, man. And well, thank you. And you did a good job navigating, not spoiling that Monster Squad 2 news.
Man, you're a really good journalist. You're a good reporter. You're digging.
Hey, I get crucified if I didn't.
I will say this: almost half of the stuff that I'm working on is nostalgic. And it goes back to those great days of the 90s and the 80s and things like that. And Monster Squad, I truly believe, is forever. And there's never an expiration date on whether or not there will be a sequel. I don't know who will do it, but I'll be first in the theater to watch it.
I'll be right behind you. So, a question I like to ask everyone near the end is, have you ever had an experience that you would consider supernatural, paranormal, or encountered an event you can't explain?
Shit. I mean, how does anyone answer that question? We were in a natural hot spring where the only people that were around were cows in the field. And we looked up and we saw this string of lights and we were like, that's it. We discovered UFOs before anyone else has. Let's tell. And it was like a Skylink or something. Yeah. What is paranormal and supernatural nowadays when you literally have everything at your fingertips? And now with deep fakes and AI, anything can be created. God, I hate deep fakes and AI. Filmmakers, if you're working on pitch materials or anything for your movie, ask another artist to collaborate with you. Don't ever use a computer to make those materials because we can tell. And the one thing that you can't put into those materials is your passion. So if you collaborate with another artist, then your work is going to be filled with love. And that stuff resonates when somebody is trying to buy a project. So I got out of it. What have I seen that is supernatural? I think the only thing that I can remember, and this is kind of like if you go far enough into ghost stories and tales of the supernatural, the only thing that happens in them is the feeling you get when you enter a room. The temperature drops, there's a slight breeze, but you never really fully see an apparition. I feel like that didn't happen. A ghost didn't look the way a ghost did until photography was invented. And that was because of things that were happening with the blur and the aperture and all of that. But when my great grandpa died, when I was a young child, I remember being in a room, feeling like I was sitting in a room with him, and I felt good, and I felt warm, and I felt like he was there right next to me. That's it. I'm sorry I could tell you something. Did I tell you about the time my brother got killed by a monster? No, I don't.
And that's a pleasant experience. I think when I ask that question, a lot of people think, it has to be spooky or whatnot. But I don't think that it usually has to be that. You'd be surprised the answers I get. I intentionally save that question for the end so they're a bit loose and they don't think I'm nuts.
Yeah. Look, just because I haven't experienced any of it doesn't mean I don't think it exists. I think we tell these stories for a reason, and they've come from something. So I'm definitely on the Mulder side where I want to believe.
Yeah, it just, fans of the show will know. One of the most popular episodes is because of that question. I asked Michael Ironside when we were near the end there, and he went on for another 45 minutes about some of the craziest shit you'll ever hear. I'll send you a link to what he said, but it's pretty nuts in a good way.
Wow.
It'll give you another perspective on the Ironside.
Right. It's funny because I gravitate to supernatural stories and they're my favorite, but I think the real horrors exist in real life. And maybe that's why slashers are so freaky, because just like the camp host, all you really need to experience a terrible day is somebody with a knife and a grudge.
And those people are out there, unfortunately. Well, I usually just end here, Henry, by giving you the guest a chance to promote what's on the horizon, but I think you've navigated that as well as you can.
That is correct.
Well, dude, it's been a great catching up with you. I look forward to what you have in the future. Great job on the camp host, and thank you for giving me some of your time.
This is always incredible. I had an excellent time here. Thank you so much for having me back on. You're my favorite podcast, and I can't wait to chat with you more.
Thanks, dude. That means a lot. You have a great rest of your day. I'll send you a link once I get everything nice and pretty. All right, folks, that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed that chat with Henry. As always, thanks for listening, and we'll see you back next time.